This year we planted over 200 flats of bedding plants here at our studio gardens, of which the majority were annual flowers. And of course that's always part of the fun, experimenting with new annuals to see if they'll perform well for us here in Oklahoma. Now the listing that I'm going to share with you, keep in mind, is not encompassing all annuals that are out there and available for the general public. It's only the ones that we've tried here, and I'd like to share with you some of those that worked and some that didn't do so well. Now when we think of annuals, most people always want to think of color, but there's a lot of annuals that grow and perform well for us that are nice texture-wise because of their foliage, and I have some here I want to show you. This tall one here we're using purposely to hide a kind of an ugly sore spot behind us here with our irrigation. It's called purple fountain grass, and in the southernmost part of Oklahoma people might get it to overwinter by mulching it, and down in Texas and along the Gulf Coast they can get it to overwinter as a perennial, but for us here in Stillwater it's usually grown as an annual. It gets killed back, but it has nice plumes, it gets pretty tall towards the end of the season, and a nice purplish contrast. So again, we're calling it an annual based on the way it performs for the majority of Oklahoma, and it's pretty easy to find in most cases. Down a little bit lower along the border is Joseph's coat, and it's one we've used for several years out here that just keeps doing wonderful for us. Again, they come in all kinds of colors and shapes and sizes, but this particular one is variegated with a pinkish purple green cast, and it makes a nice border plant. Likes full sun, obviously, just like the purple fountain grass. Also, in one of our theme gardens we've planted some copper plants that has the same kind of texture as far as the foliage. It's green variegated with some yellow, and also there's a different cultivar that has crinkled twisted leaves that are more serrated margins, and they get pretty tall, and both of the copper plants prefer partial shade, and in the north side of this barn they're getting quite a bit of shade. But again, it's nice contrasting foliage and not really pretty showy flowers or inconspicuous flowers, if any at all. Our color scheme this year was pastel colors, and this bed is a nice example of all the nice soft pink and blue colors. And one of the plants that has done pretty well for us this year is vinca, or the annual periwinkle. And we've had some that receded. Back behind me was a pretty in white, and here is pretty in pink, and there's also a pretty in rose. And these, once it got warm enough and we planted the transplants or the seedlings came up, they have bloomed for us all summer long. So the ones I want to talk to you about now are color that have really performed just about all season. Now in the pretty in white or pink or rose series, the center eye is not as pronounced as it is in some of the other ones, so it's a little bit showier and bigger flower. Also, ones that have bloomed all summer long have been the pentas or starflower, and we've got several of those in the garden this year. Right in front of our entrance we have one that is a pink color, one that's a harsher pink, variegated a little bit, a light bluish purple, and even a white. And the flower really, it just blooms all summer long and is a nice attraction to any garden or landscape, and they come in other colors as well. One that we tried for the first time this year was a different type of salvia called cherry blossom that we purchased the seed from Thompson and Morgan. And the flower is really not showy, but it did bloom all summer long, and it's kind of a pinkish white color, a typical salvia type flower. Another interesting one that we tried that is related to the thistle, it's a genus species of Cirsium japonicum. It's actually called plume thistle. It wasn't real easy to find. We saw it in a couple of garden centers, but the flower is a purplish color. We have it over by our water gardens, and it's done quite well for us, and it's bloomed pretty consistently, and it's quite aggressive. It needs a lot more space than what we thought it would take. Also by the water garden is one we've grown before in hanging baskets, but we've also found it to be very successful as a bedding plant, but it needs protection or afternoon shade, or will even take a lot of shade, and it blooms early in the morning or when the temperatures aren't too hot, and it's blue days with a true bluish color flower that's really showy early in the morning or on cloudy days. And then we've tried some other salvias with a lot of success with consistent bloom. Sometimes you'll see these sold as perennials, but we pretty much try to grow them as annuals because there's not a guarantee that they'll come back, again depending on which part of the state you're in. But the cultivars we grew this year are Rhea, Victoria Blue, or Argent, and those were found under our arbor area in one of our annual flower beds in just spectacular blue and white colors all summer long. Now we also had some favorite annual plants that kind of performed at peak times. And when I say peak times, we're talking about early in the season, around June, July, before it gets too hot. And then once it gets hot in the summer, they slow down and kind of just stagnate on us. There's really not a lot of color, and we may have to trim them back. And now this fall, where we've had cooler temperatures and moisture, they're really looking successful in their color. And one of those is right here in front of me, alyssum, and it's got some really interesting shades of purple and lavender and white. And we got this from Grimes Seed Company kind of as a trial seed, and we've really been pleased with it. This particular cultivar is called Cheers Rose. And then on the north side of the barn, we have a white one called Carpet of Snow that's really at its peak. Also, the Nirenbergia Mont Blanc has been a great border plant for us. White flowers, it loves full hot sun. And again, it's kind of starting to decline on us a little bit right now, so it preferred the hot summer, so it's kind of an alternate or opposite of the alyssum. Also, Verbena Imagination, it's a plant this year that's an AAS winner. It's got purple flowers. It's sold as an annual, but it actually kind of reminds me of the perennial verbena, and it hasn't had hardly any aphid problems or problems like some of the other annual verbenas. Purple flower, again, it did great early on. It kind of settled down a little bit during the summer. Now it's just loaded with brilliant purple flowers again for the fall. Well, annuals don't always have to grow as bedding plants in the ground. We can also use some to give us a little bit of height in the garden, and that's what we have here with one that we tried for the first time, and we really didn't know what to expect. It's called Minna Lobata, or Exotic Love, and we got it from Thompson Morgan Seed Company. We planted the seed early on in the greenhouse, and it was very, very aggressive, and then when we transplanted it, it died on us when the freeze time had already passed. But we reseeded it, and it's really taken off. It's very aggressive. It's growing up the trellis and across the top, but it's flowering on the west side a little bit, and the flowers are really very attractive, kind of a yellow pinkish color, a mix, and they cascade out, and when they get really thick, it's just really brilliant in color. So a nice addition to the garden, but again, it grows as an annual, and I'm not sure that it will reseed itself. Now, annuals also do pretty nicely in hanging baskets, and we have some here that have really been some of our favorites, especially with the pastel colors. This particular one is called Twin Spur Diacia rigescens, or rigescens, and we have it in our hanging around our mailbox planter too, and it's really done nicely. It did well early in the season, and now again that it's cooled off, but we had some spider mite problems, and it didn't like the hot weather, but right now you can't, pass it up without catching your eye. Also, another new one that we've tried from Australia, it's called Scaevola amula, and this particular one is Blue Wonder. There's also another cultivar that is Mauve Cluster, that the flowers and the leaves are a little bit smaller than this particular one, but boy, what a nice purple color, and it's bloomed pretty much consistently from the time we got it. We're also using it as an annual plant in the ground over by the water garden. And of course, we never go wrong with using lantanas, and we have the purple cultivar that's more cascading here in a hanging basket. It's doing great. We have it around our deck. Lantanas love the hot sun and have bloomed from day one. We just never go wrong with lantanas, so they're a nice change. But as usual, we always have a few things that aren't doing so well at the studio garden. Let me take you over and show you some of those. Well, we're all for diversity here at our studio gardens, and by that we mean planting a lot of different plants, because, for example, if you plant the same thing throughout the entire gardens and you get a disease or insect problem, it can wipe everything out. So planting various things would help in your own landscape too. But of course, when you do that, there are always things that may not perform or do quite as well as they look in the seed catalog, and those are some of the things that I'll show you now, which is what I'm calling my never again list. Really, they're not really worth planting to get anything out of them. And one of them is Lisianthus, which, if it's hard to see right here, but you have to dig in here, and then you'll see, I think we've got maybe one plant left right in here. It's not even blooming now, and it's bleached out. It's supposed to be a pink lisianthus. It gets real tall and it falls over to start with. It's used a lot in the greenhouse industry for cut flowers and various potted plants, but it's also recommended to use it out in a bedding plant, and we've just not been pleased with it. But there was a smaller one developed called Lisa that's over next to our deck that's supposed to keep from falling over, but again, it just didn't seem to grow and do anything for us, and I think we needed to plant them closer together. The flowers seemed to bleach out and be bruised or something, just not pleased with them at all. Also, in addition to the lisianthus, we have one that is kind of a bedding plant that we've used too, but it's also developed in the greenhouse industry again, and that one's right here behind me, and it's Terenia, or clown mix is a particular one, and it's used right here with the height. And this particular one, I think it just needed more shade or protection. It's too bleached out. It's not real showy flowers. It's not performed well for us at all. It looks a little bit ratty. So maybe if we would have put it in a different location, it would have done better out of the full sun. But it didn't get too tall, so it fit in height-wise for us, and that was a good thing. The other one that didn't perform well for us here is in the morning glory family, convolvulus, and we had blue and rose ensign, and there's a little bit of one left here, but the big hole or the dark spot on the other side was where it all died out. It bloomed early in the morning, did okay, but when the hot sun temperatures got here during the summer, which you would think morning glories would like, it just declined drastically, and it has completely died out, so there's hardly any of it left. Again, we would never really grow it. It had all kinds of insect problems, things chewing on it, just didn't perform at all. The other thing that we noticed too, you really have to be careful in reading the descriptions in the catalogs, because we tried to match this up where our height would balance out. And we thought the salvia here in the center would be the tallest plant, but guess what? The cherry blossom salvia grew taller. So really we should have put it in the center and then cascaded down with this salvia onto our smaller plants. So the descriptions may tell you one thing, but depending on your conditions, and if they've not tried them in every site statewide or United States wide, it's hard to tell. So you may get a little bit of variation. We really should have trimmed those back a little bit. But when you look at it overall, it still has a nice pastel colors, it still has the impact, but there's several things in here that just didn't perform well. And again, that helps us know what we would try again next year. Now, a lot of the things we've talked about may not be available at your garden centers. You may have to go through seed catalogs or mail order to get them. But at the same time, if you'll write down and make a list of things that you want them to carry, go to your garden centers now. This fall is the best time, and say, hey, carry these for us. These performed well at Oklahoma Gardening. And we've tried them at various sites too, in Stillwater, other people's homes with our volunteers, ambassadors, and most of the results have been pretty similar. So either try to get them through the catalogs or encourage your garden centers to carry them. That way, not only can you enjoy the color next year, but some of your other gardening friends as well.